everybody. Come on in. Hi, how are you? I'm just letting everybody in. Hello and welcome. I'm Divina Johnson. I am a life and success coach, and I am also the Pay It Forward director for the coaches here at Life Coach University. And this is a Pay It Forward webinar. So please use the chat box, and you can also use the Q&A box if you have any questions, or if you would just like to share your thoughts as we go along, please do so. And all we ask is that you pay it forward in any way which feels good to you. So I'm Divina Johnson, and today we are here to talk about finding the beauty in the pain. So I will share with you some of the lessons that I've learned through some of my toughest times, and I invite you to reflect on your own life and see where you also may find some lessons through some of those times which may have caused you some pain. So the stories that I will share with you today are my birth stories. Those were some of my toughest moments, and I have found some beauty in those tough times. So my first pregnancy with my daughter, I expected a vaginal delivery. I hadn't considered anything else. I assumed that that was the birth that I would have. And 30 hours of labor, a failed induction, and it was decided a C-section would be best for me. So the anaesthetist that was coming in to do my epidural, as she came into the room, and I can't really explain to you what the feeling was like that I had, but it was something in my gut. And in my head, I was just saying to myself, I don't want her to do it. And I don't know why that came to me, why I felt that way, but that was like my initial feelings as she came in. And so she came in to start the epidural, and then she got a page or like a beep, and she said that she had an emergency and she had to go. So she left the room. I continued to have contractions and labor in this time, and she came back, and she went to start the epidural, and then she got another beep to say she said there's another emergency. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna have to leave again. And I said, oh, that's fine. So she left for maybe another hour or so, and she came back to start the epidural, and she got another beep to say that there was an emergency. And at this point, like in my head, it's at this point screaming, saying, I don't want her to do it. But nothing came out of my mouth. It was just in my head. And she said to the midwife as she left, as she was leaving for this third time, that her shift had ended, and she'd gone over just due to, the emergencies that she'd had. Her time's gone over, but she will definitely come back and make sure that she does the epidural for me, because she's promised that she will get it done before she goes home. And so she left for another hour or so and came back, and she said, right, that's it. She said, I'm going to make sure I get this epidural done with you before I go home, because you've been waiting so many hours now. I'm going to make sure you get it done. And inside of me, I'm just saying, I don't want you to do it. I don't want you to do it. I don't want you to do it. But nothing was coming out of my mouth. It was just all in my head. So she administered the epidural, and it was the most physical pain I have ever been in my life. Anyone that's had an epidural or like had a spinal block to have a baby will understand that, you know, the epidural is there to make you numb so you don't feel anything. And this was the most pain I had ever felt, ever. And the midwife that was with me said in her 35 years, she had never seen anyone react the way that they have with this epidural. She thinks that something has gone wrong. I was saying something's gone wrong, this doesn't feel right. And the anaesthetist was saying this has never happened to her before. She doesn't think it's right. So she removed the needle, and then instantly there was relief. I had no more pain. I had relief. In this time, her replacement had come in to the room because, you know, her shift had ended a while ago. So he came into the room and she updated him on what had happened, and, you know, the fact that it hadn't hadn't gone in correctly or hadn't seemed right at this time, and for him to try, basically, for him to try. She's going home. So he examined my back, just like with his hands, like felt all of my back. And he said, I understand what's happened here. And he said, usually in someone, your spine is in these like blocks that go up your spine. And in between these bones, you know, there's a bit of space. And in that space is where they put the needle. And he said, but with your back, he said, your bones are very, very close together. And he said, I feel as though the width of the needle is the amount of gap that you have between your bones, which means that I need to be 100% accurate or you're going to feel it. And so he tried again, and it was still a bit of trial and error and still quite painful, but he managed to get it done in the end. So my lesson in this, from this experience, was to trust my gut, even when you can't explain why. And as I said, I didn't know why I had instantly felt the way I had felt when the first lady had come in, but there was just something in me that made me feel that I just didn't want her to do it. But I didn't act on my gut. And so I just want to ask you, before I go on, has anyone ever had a feeling in their gut, but not acted on it, only to be proven right anyway? And you can use the chat box and you can use the Q&A to put your answers in. I'm just going to look at them now. And yes, I've got here, yes, sometimes. Yes, it's happened to me before. Someone's put this happened multiple times, right? So we have a feeling inside and we don't act on it. But why do you think that is? Why do you think that we don't act on that feeling that we have inside, that gut feeling? And you can put your answers in the chat or in the Q&A if you wish. Scared of being wrong? Yeah, I can see that. I don't know. Someone just put, I don't know, but I never do, even when I know I'm right. Yeah. So I would like to offer a theory, and I believe it's because we're not taught to. We're not taught to listen to ourselves. From when we are children, babies, growing up into school, if you're part of if you go to school, you know, through the public system, even private, we're always taught that the answer is outside of us. that somebody else knows better, that if we need to know the answer, we need to go somewhere someone else knows. This is how most of society is brought up, to know that the answer is outside of them. Very rarely, if at all, are we ever taught that we have the answers inside of us. And there is something called instincts and gut instincts, if you like, that gut feeling that can also guide us, that I would actually say is the guide, is inside of us. And we're not taught to do that. We're not taught to listen and to trust ourselves. So I want to offer you some ways in which you can learn to do that, learn to trust yourself more. And some of the ways that I've written down for you here is to honor your feelings, honor how you feel at that time. So if I had said in my situation to that first anaesthetist, I'm scared that you might rush this epidural and not take your time because you're tired due to all of the emergencies that you've had and you're over your shift. And she might have said, don't worry. She may have reassured me and said, don't worry, I'm going to take my time. And then she may have taken her time. She might have thought about it. Or she could have even said, okay, no problem. As there's no emergency right now, there was nothing was happening as a reason for me to need the epidural like right there and then. And it was okay to wait. I'd already waited, about 5 hours since the first time we decided that the C-section would be best. So there was no reason to hurry it. So she may have even said, okay, no problem. Let's wait for my replacement to come in and let them do it for you. So she may have also thought about it, and maybe the situation may have been a bit different. Because there's also something for you to think about, is that you never know what it might do for someone else when you honor your own feelings and speak your truth. Because normally what happens is when you speak your truth, you give permission for the other person to speak theirs. So I imagine now in hindsight, when I think about that situation, because each time that anaesthetist came in, she was so apologetic that she had to leave to go and to the emergencies, that she couldn't get my epidural because, through this time I'm contracting, so, I'm in pain. And she, the epidural is there so that you can stop the pain and not feel anything. And she just didn't have the time to do it due to the emergencies that were happening. So each time she would leave, she would be really apologetic. So when I think about it now, I imagine that in that interaction, there's a woman who wants to relieve me from the pain that I'm in, and could be thinking to herself, gosh, this woman has been in pain for, these last 5 hours since I said that I was going to do the epidural and I haven't done it. So I really want to make sure that I'm going to get it done before I leave my shift. And then there's me in my head saying, I really don't want you to do it. I think that you're going to rush it. I think that you're too tired. I don't want you to do it. And neither of us are communicating this. So this interaction that we're having is pretty inauthentic, because neither of us are saying what we think. I'm not saying what I think. She's thinking that I really, that maybe she's thinking that I'll think badly of her, or that she hasn't given me this epidural yet. So we're both having these thoughts, and then the interaction that we're having is not authentic. If one of us, if I had just, if we can only control ourselves, if I had just spoken up and said that I'm scared that you're going to rush it, I'm scared that you're too tired, it might have then allowed her to speak her truth and say, you know what, I am. And if it's okay, could you just wait until my replacement arrives, since he's, fresh out of bed and he's, the beginning of his shift, and uh, he'll be able to do your epidural for you. So there's a quote also that I really love, which says, speak your truth even if your voice shakes. So I encourage you to be authentic and speak your truth, and you won't regret it. So that was one of my first lessons from my first birth. My second pregnancy, I went into hospital for one of the checks that you have, and the nurse said to me, I see that you've had a C-section last time. Obviously, due to what happened last time, you'll be having a planned C-section this time. And I said, yes. And I was terrified. And there was a few lessons from that experience, that interaction there, which was quite short, but had quite a big impact, is know your story and know your options. So I actually wasn't 100% sure why I needed to have a planned C-section this time. I had a C-section first time, but having a one C-section doesn't equal that you must have another one a second time. And I didn't know what the obviously part of her comment was, and but I just said yes because I was scared. And but I didn't really know my story. Like, what had happened? Like, what had happened that makes it that I would need to have a C-section on for my second birth? I really didn't know, and I didn't ask. So the other part that I learned about from that interaction there is know your story, know your options, and question everything, especially when it's your body that we're talking about too. It's your body. You are in control of it. It belongs to you. So ask questions. Why is that? Like, why would I need one? I could have just asked, why do I need to have a C-section a second time? What is it about the first birth that makes it that I must have a C-section on my second birth? And it goes a little bit back to the first lesson that I learned, that I spoke about, is how we see authority and how we see who knows best. I mean, these are the medical professionals, right? So we look at that as that they do know best. But we should also be making decisions with knowledge. So another lesson is never make a decision under fear, which is what I did. I said yes because I was scared. Really, you should be making decisions with knowledge, based on knowledge, confidence, and because you want to, making a decision about something because you want to, and not out of fear. And that can come from, or finding a way to overcome that would be through knowledge, through information, and becoming confident to be able to make a good decision and not from a place of fear. Another lesson in that was learning to say no. So a question for you guys: who has an issue saying no? Again, just use the chat and the Q&A for it. We have quite a few yeses. I don't like to say no. I find it hard to say no. Yeah. Yeah, we have quite a few yeses. Another thing I want you to know is that no is a complete sentence. You can just say no. If the other person wants more information, they can ask, but you are under no obligation to have to explain yourself as to why you don't want to go here, or you don't want to do this, or you don't want this procedure when you have autonomy over your own body. No is a complete sentence. A lot of people, and I was in there too, have issues saying no. Normally because we're thinking about what the other person might feel if we say no. And one of the things that I learned when I really started to exercise my no and use my no is that I thought that when I would say no, that everything would collapse and everyone would hate me and it would be like this terrible thing if I was to say no. But instead, what I realized is that people honored my no. You know, when I said no, I wasn't actually met with the confrontation that I thought that I was going to be met with. People honored my no. It was okay. It was actually okay to say no. So a way for you to practice, because I think that that's the best way to learn how to say no, is to practice, and practice maybe on the small things. So start with, maybe you don't want the extra piece of cake. Maybe you don't want to make dinner tonight and you want to take away instead. Maybe you don't want to go and see your friend this day or whatever it might be, but maybe practicing the no's, again, going back to one of the earlier lessons, which is to honor your feelings at the time. So if you feel like you don't want to do something, you can say no. And yeah, practice on the small things and build your confidence. Again, also, back to another lesson connected is you're building your trust in yourself. So if you feel like you want to say no, and then you say no, you have trusted your feelings and you've honored yourself. So you will start to build confidence. That's how you start to build confidence in yourself. So say no with the smaller things, and then the confidence will build. And should bigger decisions come along where you feel like you want to say no, or you feel like you just want to ask a question, maybe you just want to take a pause, because sometimes no for some can mean, concrete no, that's it. Maybe you just want to take a minute, and you can even say no, not right now, or give me a minute. Can I just let me have a minute to think about that? You can say no in different ways also that don't seem so final, if that's what you need, if that's what the situation gives. So try just saying, not right now, let me think about that, I'll get back to you. There are some other ways in which you can also say no. So with my third pregnancy, this was a VBAC attempt, a vaginal birth after cesarean, which ended in a C-section. I had done much more research about my birth this time round, which is why I decided that I wanted to try for a VBAC, though it did end up in a C-section. And due to the COVID restrictions at the time, I labored on my own in the hospital until my partner could come the next day. So I went in to the hospital about 3 p.m. on a Thursday, and my partner was allowed to come to the hospital at 7 a.m. on the Friday. So I labored all that time alone. And during that time, I had a lot of time to reflect. So having contractions the whole time, which anyone that has had those will know they can be quite painful. But there's breaks sometimes too. And just in the time, I had a real good think about life in general, actually, and also particularly about my previous births and the one that I was having now at that time. And I realized that the experiences that I had had were traumatic and they caused me trauma. And I had never thought about my birth as traumatic before. I had healthy babies. I was healthy, they were through C-section, but we all came out okay. So I had just never thought about it as traumatic before. And when I started thinking about it more and really thinking about all the different experiences that I had had, I could see how those experiences were showing up in other areas of my life, in just my normal everyday areas of my life. And I could see that they were attached to these experiences that I had not dealt with. So my next lesson that I had learned is that trauma can be quiet. It doesn't have to be the way that society may portray trauma to be. Trauma can be quiet. Can be quiet. Trauma can be putting on a brave face, smiling, making everything seem as though it's okay. It can be a slow bonding process with your baby. It can be a lack of trust in others and in yourself. It can show up when you have delivered a perfectly healthy baby by a C-section, but still feel sad. And these are the things that was happening to me. And I realized that maybe lack of trust I had in myself in certain situations, the lack of trust that I had in others were attached to the experiences that I had had through my births, and where I hadn't honored my feelings in different places, and they were then showing up in other areas of my life. And if you can hear in the background, that's number 3. You can hear there. He is 10 weeks old tomorrow. And so what I would invite you to do is to acknowledge the experiences that you have and acknowledge the trauma. Not acknowledge that it was traumatic, but those experiences that you may have had, and then work on healing. And which is what I did. I did that through coaching. Once I had realized that ways in which I was showing up in my life were attached to experiences that I hadn't healed previously, I went straight to coaching. And yes, coaches have coaches too, because we have stuff too. So I managed to heal the trauma that I had been through. And what I've shared with you today is just some of the things that happened through my birth experiences. There were other things that happened too, but I worked through that with a coach to come to a place of acceptance and peace with what had happened. And that's also how I found my own coaching niche also, is going through those experiences and realizing that that's something that I know that I can help other women with too. And that's something that I do. But definitely acknowledge that trauma looks different. It doesn't always look how you might think that it should look. It can look different, and know that it can be healed. So those are some of the lessons that impacted my life, and healing them has changed my life for the better. So I just want to recap them so that you have them. So one of the first lessons is to trust your gut, trust your instinct, and you can build on that by honoring your feelings at the time. As the quote said, speak your truth even if your voice shakes. You won't regret it. Know your story and know your options. Don't let anyone write your story for you. Only you do that. So I was I was unclear about what had really happened in my first birth to make it necessary that I needed that I needed a second C-section. I wasn't sure why, and I didn't ask. And I made decisions out of fear. So you don't want to do that. So know your story and then learn what your options are. Learn to say no. And remembering that you can say no in different ways. Let me get back to you. Let me think about it. You can also just say no. And definitely start with the small things first. So maybe no to wanting to go to a certain place, no to making dinner, no, I don't want to tidy up today, I'm going to tidy up tomorrow, or start with small things like to practice what no sounds like, what it feels like. And when the bigger decisions come along, you will have more confidence in yourself to say no. And lastly, acknowledge the trauma that you may have been through and experienced, and know that it can be healed, and definitely work on ways that healing is comfortable for you. For me, I found that in coaching and being able to share my feelings, having someone objectively look at my situation and help me work through it. So if this was helpful to you in any way, let me know, get in touch. So you can email me at divinajohnson.com. You can find me on my website, divinajohnson.com. And remember that this is a pay it forward session for Life Coach University. So if this was helpful to you, if you took anything away, please share it with family and friends, pay it forward in any way that feels good to you. We've had so many people do so many different things, whether that be calling a friend, smiling more, visiting a neighbor, anything that feels good to you that helps your maybe family, friends, community. Definitely do that and let us know. And there are many coaches on many different days that do this coaching, and we all do it for love. So visit the website, lifecoachuniversity.com, and tell your friends about it. Visit the site, book onto the coaching webinars that you see on there, and pay it forward. And until next time.